there we go. I was like, camera doesn't seem to cooperate. So today we're doing a lesson on how to avoid cheese, aka how to avoid being cheesy in your writing. Um, Generally, unless you're writing a kid's book, you don't want it to be cheesy. If you're writing a kid's book, then you might actually be cheesy because a lot of kids' shows are cheesy because kids enjoy that. Um, However, if you're not writing a kid's book, generally that is not your goal. Your goal isn't to make your audience go, oh, that was cheesy. So, I thought it would be fun to talk about today how to best avoid cheesiness. So, the first thing that we are going to talk about is, once again, something that if you're doing a kid's book, great job. If you're not doing a kid's book, not so good job. You have to be careful of being overly preachy. These are the books that you've run into before, where it's like, and then the bully just needed a hug. You're like, that's okay. So they're trying to give an overly preachy life lesson of like kindness or don't bully people or overcome hard things. Those are all great, but you can give those without being like slap them in the face with the moral of the story, which is what a lot of kids' books do, right? They just keep slapping you with do this thing until you're finally like, okay, I get it, I'll do the thing. Whereas in teen and adult literature, that gets annoying, right? You're just like, okay, we get it. Kindness is the best. Move on. So if you're doing something where you do want a life lesson to shine through, just make sure that you allow it to naturally. Allow your characters to persevere and show their perseverance and be like, hey, a life lesson that could be taken from this is perseverance. But don't say the life lesson is perseverance and like slap your reader with it. Just allow them to ingest it naturally through your characters. um, I like to think of the overly preachy life lesson of being like various foods, where if someone's like, hey, you gotta try this, and you try it and you like it, you're like, that's great. But if someone's like, you gotta try it, pretty please, pretty please, then you're just like, okay, I don't even want to now. Leave me alone. Doesn't matter how good your life lesson is, if you're overly preachy, your readers are gonna run the other direction. So, next thing that can make it overly cheesy is apparently my marker dying dramatically, which is too bad that that's not the thing we're going to talk about next. But next thing we're going to talk about is names. Now, this might sound weird. You're like, it's a name. How does that make it cheesy? Have you ever run into children's books, where the name is something like Francois the Magnificent? And you're like, no one would name their child that. Or alternatively, you hear superhero names in kids' books and they're like, oh yes, a mermaid named Splash. And I'm like, I don't care if they're mermaids. They're not naming their child Splash. Or alternatively, you might run into superhero problems where it's like the most mightiest, strongest, best man. And you're like, no one would call you that. Again, kids' books, great. Do that. Funny, engaging, makes your audience go, this is kind of comedic. But if you're doing it with all seriousness and being like, the girl's like, what's your name, mighty hero? And he's like, Francois the Magnificent. That just makes everyone go, just full on spit take where you're like, that was terrible. So be careful of your names. Make sure that they sound organic and normal and like something someone would actually name a child. And if they are something that someone would not name their child, and you're doing that because their parents were genuinely dumb, then acknowledge that. Have the person be like, yes, I know my name is this, but I don't like to be called that. If you're gonna do a cheesy name, just embrace that and have the character embrace it too, and be like, ugh. Because I don't know about you, but if I was named something like, I don't know, Princess of Ponyland, I'd be like, ugh. I wouldn't be like, yes, that's my name. So, generally, your characters might be a little annoyed if their name's pretty peculiar. Alright, next thing that we're gonna go with. Oh, heck yeah, that erased beautifully. I'm gonna use this marker from now on. Alright. rushing. This, unfortunately, is the biggest problem of, well, pretty much everyone. If you are feeling like your writing is cheesy or someone else is like, this feels a little cheesy, double check your pacing. If your plot is going like fast as a bullet train, you might have a problem. Most of the time, it feels cheesy if it's overly rushed. That's why kids' shows tend to feel that way. It's because a lot of kids' shows, it's like, we have a huge problem, like a catastrophic problem. And then they're like, we solve it in 2 hours. And it's like, no, you don't. That's not how life works. But of course, in their minds, it's like, oh no, the Queen of the Fairies got kidnapped. We were gonna solve this in 2 hours, even though we're six. And it's like, that's nope. Again, for a kids book, great, because kids don't have that high of an attention span. So, and the idea of them solving a kidnapping fairy crime in 2 hours makes them feel awesome. But for teens and adults, they're gonna go, oh, okay. And they're gonna feel a little bit cheated out of the character growth and the story growth and the plot development and all those fancy good things. This is why word count tends to matter. Most young adult books that are written well, unless they are a novella, which is specifically a shorter story, will hit a minimum of 50,000 words. If you are writing a young adult novel and you have not hit 50,000 words yet, you probably are rushing something. Or even multiple things, depending on how short it is. If you're like 25,000 words, you might be rushing everything. But if it's like, hey, 40,000 words, you might just need to go back into a few scenes and, smooth them out a little. You can take that good old polishing iron and iron it out. Get all the wrinkles out. Um, and there's nothing wrong with having a fast-paced plot. I think that's the problem. People assume fast-paced means rushed, and that is not the same thing. You can experience a fast-paced plot. For example, Avengers. If you've seen any of the Marvel movies, those are fast-paced, action-packed plots. But are they rushed? No, they're not. They take their time. The way that you have fast-paced without being rushed is you make sure that the heart of the plot itself is still being slowly carried out, even if there's a lot of things that are causing them to feel intense. So, for example, if we don't stop the bad guy in 10 days, he's going to set off a nuke. That gives us a sense of rush, a sense of fast plot, without feeling the rush of being like, oh, that's too short. Now, if they said, like, the nuke's gonna go off in 10 minutes and they're in freaking Russia, it's like, we're not gonna solve this, man. The world's over, it's toast. But if you're saying, like, hey, 10 days, that's a reasonable amount of time, but it also puts that pressure on you so that way your reader feels like it's fast paced, even if you do it over the course of 10 days. Meanwhile, though, the other issue is with short stories. Short stories, the problem if it's feeling rushed is often that your plot is yay big and your word count is yay. And then you're just trying to pack all of those same things that you would pack into a novel into 5 pages, and that's just really, really difficult. Not impossible, but really, really difficult. Typically, for a short story, if you don't want it to feel rushed and cheesy, you want to make sure that you can describe your plot in 5 words or less. If it takes you longer than 5 words to describe what your plot is, you probably are overdoing it, and it will not fit within the word count you have. Now, that can obviously change slightly. Like, for example, with the 6,000 word count that we used to have for the story contest, I would absolutely say 10 words. I would say for every 3,000 words about, you can add 5 words to your sentence. So, like, if you have a 9,000 word count limit, I'd say a 15-word sentence for your plot. If you have a 3,000 word count limit, I'd say 5. The reason why is because the more complex that sentence gets, the more complex your plot is going to get, which means the more thick your story is going to be. And then if you try to fit it all in one, the more crunch you'll have to do, which is going to cause a few issues. All right. Next. As my marker died on me in the middle of the sentence earlier. Drama. Drama's not bad. Now here's the catch. You know there are lots of movies that are dramas. There's a lot of TV shows that are dramas. There's lots of subplots in various things that are dramatic and give drama. Drama is not the problem. The problem is melodrama. Now, the difference is drama is when things are dramatic naturally. So, for example, someone gets super injured in a fight or something like that, and then they're like, I can't do my job anymore, and I'm so frustrated that I can't do my job anymore, and I'm going to be angry at everyone around me because I can't do my job anymore. That's natural drama. Is it not necessarily the best reaction? No, but it's a human reaction and it adds drama. Melodrama is when it's like, I got a paper cut and I can't work for a single day. Oh no, I'm gonna die. And it's like, grow up. You'll be fine. Or alternatively, this is like with kids. You'll know this is why it's great in children's literature, but not so great in adult and teen literature. This is similar to what kids do. You've noticed this before. Ice cream today. The world is ending, and it's like, okay, time out. Time out, buddy. I don't think your world's over. I think you're gonna be okay. Um, this tends to happen with a lot of romances, and this is why romances often get the cheesy label because of the fact that they tend to be very melodramatic, where it will be like, we're getting together and we're so happy, and then all of a sudden his random father who turns out to be a mafia boss is coming back and is like, come join the mafia, son, and he's like, we can't be together anymore, Vanessa, and it's like, why, what is happening? That's melodrama, where they're just adding in drama for the sake of drama. There's no foreshadowing or anything else. They're just like, here, drama. There's no purpose to it aside from just being dramatic. Um, but if you add drama naturally, like you've been foreshadowing this whole time, he's like, I don't want to be with you. And she's like, but why? He's like, you don't understand, or something like that. That can seem cheesy. However, if you're foreshadowing a bigger plot, that's actually important to do that kind of cheesy dialogue because of the fact that having a little bit of cheesy dialogue is infinitely better than having a cheesy plot. One is like, here's some cheddar. The other one is like, here's a whole block of Parmesan. It's like, no, I think I could take the little bit. We're good. So, make sure when you're adding drama to your stories that you're not adding too much drama. Or alternatively, if you're adding a lot of drama, that your characters aren't overreacting to it and acting like the whole world's going to end over something small or tiny. Or alternatively, if you are doing something that genuinely they should be overreacting to, make sure that it doesn't blindside your readers. And you're just like, guess what? She's the princess of the castle. And it's like, what princess? We haven't talked about a princess in 12 chapters, and now all of a sudden she's a princess? Like, excuse me. You gotta make sure those things are foreshadowed well. All right, next. Once again, something that romances are guilty of, being overly flowery. You know, the river runs like a ballet dancer across the meadow, and the meadow flowers smell like the most gorgeous perfume as she flounces through the meadow. And it's like, okay, stop. Pause. Some flowery language can absolutely be fun, poetic even. But if you're doing just flowery on top of flowery on top of flowery, that's the equivalent of having someone walk by having bathed in perfume. I don't know about you, but typically it's like, okay, I like perfume, but I'm gonna die. And it's the same thing with flowery language. If you do a little spritz of flowery language in your writing, that's nice. That's pleasant. That's floral. But if you want to do full on just bathe in it, some people like that, and you can do that for those people if that's your choice. But generally, you might get a claim of being cheesy as a result because. Let's be real here. Who talks like that except for romance writers? And again, if you're a poet, nothing wrong with that. Poets, be flowery as much as you'd like. But if you're writing prose and you're not just going to be like, I embrace my floweriness and just go for it, probably want to tone it back. Use it lightly. All right. Now you have running into your tropes. No. That's all I have to say. Don't do it. It it was all a dream. No, it's been overused. The first time, the first person who ever did that, whoever wrote that was a genius, you know? But after it's been done 270 times, no, we're done. And beyond that, the reason it feels cheesy too is because you've invested so much in this character, and then you're like, psych, none of it was real. And you, as a, I don't know about you, but if I was a reader reading that, I'd be like, no, throws the book. Like, it makes you so angry because you've invested yourself all for nothing. And you were like, I don't even get to see where this goes. I don't even get to see if this ends. I don't even get to see what happens next. Like, the heck? Why did I just invest in a dream? I thought I was investing in characters and a story and a plot. The reason why this bothers people most of all is that investment. If you have a character who is incredibly compelling and a plot who is very compelling, and then you just tell your readers, psych, I'm not going to tell you how it ends, that makes people mad. So, in general, even if you don't say it was a dream, if you say it was a hallucination, or if you say it was a prophetic dream in some sort of seer's eyes or something, like, just in general, don't pull that away from the reader. Allow it to be real. They want it to be real, so let it be real. Or if you're gonna have it be a dream, make sure that you foreshadow it extensively. For example, I just watched an episode of one of my favorite TV shows, and they had it where it was an alternate reality where they didn't exist, kind of It's a Wonderful Life-esque kind of episode. That was okay because they foreshadowed it from the beginning. From the very beginning, they were like, hey, they have all these magical artifacts, and they touched a magical artifact, and now it's like they never existed. And it's like, okay, so the magical artifact made it so he's in this weird alternate future. Like, we're on board with that. But if they were just like, psych, guess what? It's been an alternate future this whole time. The whole series is a lie. Like, that would have made me mad. So, next thing. Far too many morning routines. I don't know about you, but there's way too many books nowadays that are just inherently cheesy because of the fact that it's like, oh, I wake up in the morning and I go brush my blonde hair and whatnot, and it's like, okay, you're just doing this so you can describe the character. Like, there's no other purpose to it. Now, if you want to have them wake up and it's like, psych, I'm in some random hotel room that I don't recognize or something like that, and I think I've been kidnapped. Okay, that's interesting. Fine to have a morning scene that's interesting, but if you're just like literally, the character yawns, the character groans and turns off the alarm, they brush their hair, they take a shower, like, we don't need to know this. I'm bored. Unless there's something inherently interesting, like they look in the mirror and they see their dead relative standing behind them or something, then it's like, ooh, interesting. But if you don't have anything interesting and it's literally just them waking up being boring, it feels a little cheesy. Feels like you're just trying to have a cop out way of us getting to know your character. Which, even though getting to know your character and describing them is important, you can do it in a much more interesting way. All right. Next, you guys are probably also familiar with this one. When the weather and your feelings line up perfectly. So, they're angry and storm clouds rumble in the distance. They're sad and everything's raining. And, it was cool the first few times. Like I said, a lot of these are things that are like, oh, that was cool the first few times. And now you're like, okay, I'm kind of tired of the characters crying and it's raining outside trope. If you're gonna do the weather is showing their feelings, have it be for a reason. For example, they're magical, and so like the one lady in Encanto, if she gets mad, then she has a little storm cloud. That's cool. But if you're doing just the weather just so happens to match with her feelings, it's like, how often does that happen? I don't know about you, but most days when I'm mad, the sky is clear. Most days when I'm sad, the sky is fine. Like, it's not vibing with me. Or alternatively, if I'm like, hey, I want it to be nice and warm today, it's like freaking freezing. Most of the time, my feelings and the weather do not agree with each other, um, which is why this feels so cheesy because it's not very realistic. If you want to do something to add a little extra to the scene, a little bit of drama, a little bit of intrigue, you can do that. Like if they're hunting through the wilderness and they're trying to hunt down this person who killed their lover or something, and it's raining, you can have it be for a reason. Like it's washing away their tracks, and so they're like crying out into the night and thunder strikes. That's awesome. But the reason it's awesome is because of the fact that you're like, hey, I feel like there's a deeper reason to this. It's washing away the tracks. They can't follow them, and therefore they're angry. It doesn't feel like the weather and their feelings are lining up so much as it's just like a cool cinematic moment. And I think that's where people get confused between cinematic moments and cheesy weather moments. And the difference is mainly in the purpose of the weather. If the weather is serving multiple purposes, then it's cool. If it's literally just there to convey your character's emotional state, that's not really what it's supposed to be doing. All right. I love this purple marker. It is amazing. All right. Moving on to the next one. This one we talk about a lot, but it's because it is incredibly important. Now, what makes info dumping feel cheesy is the fact that no one naturally talks like that. You don't, I mean, unless they do, which is why Hermione works. If you have a character that specifically just info dumps all the time, that works. But if you have a character who goes from being like dumb as a rock, and then all of a sudden they're like, I know everything about magic and I will tell it all to you, that's a problem. When characters are acting out of character in order to give you information, that feels cheesy. Or alternatively, like with the flowery language earlier, when you're overly describing how the magic system works, that can get a little frustrating and feel a little cheesy and be like, okay, can we get to the actual story here? All right. Boop. In general, it's best to avoid cliches and tropes. Now, when I say avoid, I don't mean you have to avoid them altogether. Some people like those. There are actually sometime on Instagram where people will advertise their book by saying, hey, my romance has the enemies to lovers trope, and it has the, this trope, and then that trope, and then this trope, or whatever. Um, Tropes aren't necessarily a bad thing. Cliches aren't even a bad thing. The reason they become bad is when it's overly done and it's not done in a unique way. So, for example, enemies to lovers. If someone wrote enemies to lovers the exact same way every time, you'd be bored. But if they have a very unique twist on it, or if they have an interesting reason for them being enemies, then it makes it much more interesting and it helps actually invest us in things. So be careful when using cliches and tropes. Make sure that if you are going to use them, make sure you have your own twist on it. Whatever that is. If it's, instead of damsel in distress, it's dude in distress. Um, if you want, you can also have, like, instead of enemies to lovers, it's lovers to enemies. I don't know. Like, make sure you have your own little spin on it. Make sure that whatever you're doing has a flavor of you in it. People aren't reading your book because they want it to taste like everyone else's. They're doing it because you have your own unique flavor to bring to the table. Um, I don't know about you, but if I went to every restaurant in town and they all tasted the same, I'd stop going out to eat. You go to a different place because you want a different taste of something, right? And that's the same thing with your guys' writing. Your own unique style is what helps people love it. You have your own sense of flavor. I'm just gonna call it flavor with your writing and your own sense of your palette, your reading palette. And honestly, if some people don't like it, that's okay. If some people love it, that's also great. Like everyone has different things they love and don't love, right? I know I've met tons of people who don't like Percy Jackson, but I also know it's clearly very popular, so a lot of people love it. So it all depends on who you are and what you like, and that's okay. We don't have to all like the same things. The issue comes in when you're just rewriting the same plot over again. You've probably seen movies like that where you're like, this is just X movie but with women, or this is just X movie but with dogs, and like that's a problem. That makes it feel like kind of boring. But if you are like, hey, this is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, but interesting new twist, that's so much more interesting, right? All right. Do you guys have any other questions about how to avoid being cliche or cheesy in your writing? I'll give you a second to think, since I see pondering on faces. If you don't have a question, just give me a nod so I can know who doesn't have questions. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. If you guys have any other questions or about other writing things, feel free to ask. If you also have suggestions about a lesson you would love to have, please give me lesson suggestions. I always love when people give me suggestions. So if you have something you're like, I really want to learn about this, tell me, and I will try and figure out everything I can so I can help teach you more about that. Whatever it is, even if I need to bring in an expert, if I'm like, I don't know anything about that, but I will find someone, I can do that too. So just let me know if there's anything that interests you. All right. And we officially have math 31. I think it's 34. 34 days till the contest is over. So, if you have written your first draft, start polishing. If you haven't written your first draft, get to typing if you're interested. If you don't want to enter, that's okay too. No pressure. I won't like force you to enter or be mad if you don't or whatever. Like, I just think it's fun and I think it's fun to expand your horizons, right? Um, so please, if you're interested or thinking about it, start working on it, especially because I want you guys to do the best that you guys possibly can. If you have any questions about that, also feel free to ask.